also serving for a short while in Paris at the UNESCO, where she was deputy head of mission. She also has served as Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs at the State Department. She's had tours of duties in the Ukraine and twice in Russia. From 2005 to 2008, she served as cultural attaché in Romania. She's a graduate of UC Berkeley, master's degree from Georgetown, and I think you're extremely well suited for the job because I counted 5 languages: Romanian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Russian. So my first question is, which one do you speak best?
Let's see, sorry, something's got to pop up there. Probably Spanish.
Spanish, I see. Okay.
I grew up speaking Spanish, so it's almost a maternal language.
I see, and I see you're Californian. So I guess the first obvious question is, tell us a little bit about yourself. Somebody described you as modest and shy, which I found hard to believe, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Who described that way?
Someone who characterized themselves as a friend of yours. So.
Okay, modest and shy. Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, as you said, I'm a Californian, native Californian, grew up in Southern California, but spent part of my childhood in Latin America. So I grew up speaking Spanish. My father was a Spanish teacher, so we spoke Spanish at home. So that was kind of the beginning of my interest in international affairs, foreign languages, and all that. And then I studied, as you said, at UC Berkeley. I did a junior year abroad in Barcelona, Spain. Also studied in Portugal, in Coimbra. I was an exchange student in Brazil. So lots of international experiences in my background, which encouraged me, made the Foreign Service seem quite interesting. So I applied, out of grad school and was accepted, and I've been doing that ever since.
I see. Well, this is round 2 for you, and I think we're trying to figure out the personnel history. I think you must be the first diplomat who arrived not as an ambassador, but who served here before, but then came back as ambassador. Do you know that? Is that the case?
It might be possible. I'm not sure. I do know I'm the first woman ever to have held the position. Right. I thought I might be the first Californian, but I think there was at least one Californian before me.
I see. Okay. Well, California is well represented. Now that you've come back, were there any lessons you learned the first time around that sort of came in handy when you came back this time?
Well, I think, obviously having lived here for 3 years, having had the opportunity, I was cultural attaché between 2005 and 2008. So I had the opportunity to travel throughout the country, to see a lot of different cities and rural areas. So I think, and to learn the language, most importantly. So I think that has served me well. It feels like, in a way, like coming home, because also when I was here, our children were young. They were for ages 4 to 7 when we arrived, and they went to school here, including our youngest, who went to Romanian school and became very, like a little Romanian girl. So it was nice to return and, have that experience, although now the kids are grown and flown, so they're not here with us this time. But it was a great host for us as a family, and then professionally as well.
Yes, you mentioned the thing about being the first female ambassador here to Romania. Does that change your thinking in any way, or it's just a nice historical fact, or does it make you think more sensitive to certain issues or women's issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't change things, I wouldn't say, but I'm hoping that I can be supportive, find ways to be supportive of more participation of women in politics and leadership roles here in Romania. I think Romania is lagging a little behind the rest of the EU in that area. So I hope that hopefully by example and support, I can encourage, more participation in politics, more participation in the parliament, more, women in leadership roles.
And when you came back after, well, you maybe came on visits, but you come back officially with a 15-year lapse, did you feel as though the country changed more than you thought, or was a bit behind the eight ball, or what's your feeling about that from a evolution?
Well, yeah, I think the country has changed quite a bit. And I think those of us who've been away and returned probably see it more readily, I think, than people who are living it day to day. I think it's easy to be, caught up in the difficulties of the moment and lose track of the larger context of how much things have changed. I looked up some of the statistics economically to see what has changed. The GDP has almost tripled since I was here before. The per capita income, I think most importantly, was 44% of the EU average when I was here before, and now it's 77% of the EU average. So that's a huge jump. There have been over $60 billion in EU funds invested. And I see that everywhere I go. I was just in Salina Turda, which has been renovated with the help of EU money. Overall trade has increased. Imports have doubled. Exports have tripled. The trade with the United States has tripled. The number of US companies here has doubled. There are some areas where I noticed there hasn't been as much progress as I would have hoped in road construction, for example, highway construction. You probably have experienced that.
Sure.
There are a couple of new airports and some more coming now online, but I think overall road and rail infrastructure has not advanced as much as one might have hoped. But I see lots of progress economically, and also just in the cities traveling around Romania. I was in Iași, which is looking really beautiful. Cluj. I've been in Timișoara. And you see a great deal of renovation, improvements. So yeah, I see a lot of change.
Well, that's a pretty good report card. I mean, having all those facts there. I just want to turn right to the news. That's one of the big news, obviously, around the world is what happened in Istanbul the other day, or in Ankara, with the election of reelection of Erdogan, President Erdogan. How do you view that in terms of our wider geopolitical concerns in the Ukraine next door? A good thing, a bad thing, too early to say, because it's certainly he's been a controversial figure in this war.
Yeah, well, I'm not the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, so it's not really for me to comment, I think, on that. But I mean, I think from our perspective, it's here in Romania, what's most important is, to see ongoing cooperation with Turkey insofar as, the war in Ukraine.
Well, then let's leaving it between our two countries, between the United States and Romania. I would say that Romania as a place is far more important. The stakes are higher now than they ever were, given what's going on. And looking ahead to next year, we have presidential elections in both countries. Do you see, given the long-term U.S. interest here, any difficult scenarios in terms of what could happen politically on the Romanian side and what could happen in the United States, something that keeps you up at night worrying about or thinking about what could happen on both sides of the Atlantic on this, between the United States and Romania?
Well, first of all, let me just say that I think having returned here, I see that the relationship with the United States has strengthened and deepened. And is, I think, very healthy and strong and improving all the time. I think that, it's based on shared values, shared democratic values, shared interest in economic prosperity, and a shared view of security in the region. Romania is playing a very important role in terms of the alliance, within the alliance, and as a partner for the United States, and has been a steadfast supporter of Ukraine since the war has begun. So I think we have, we have very similar views and attitudes to the security situation in the region and to our, goals going forward. And I don't really see that changing. I think our interests are deeper than any one, administration or one government. If you look at across the board public attitudes in both countries. So no, I don't think there's anything that keeps me up at night.
I see. Well, in Romania today, there's always this continuing discussion about this power sharing arrangement and when it's going to happen. Can you give us some of your views on that? How do you see that situation evolving?
Yeah, well, I know we were all expecting that there would be a rotation as of last Friday that seemed to be agreed between the two key parties and the coalition, and then it didn't happen. They're, given the strike and I guess discussions between the parties that it was better to delay a bit. Today in Bucharest, there are lots of public protests downtown. I was out and saw the teachers, all coming together. So I think it's understandable that the government might have decided now's the time to focus on addressing those issues more immediate than, reorganizing the government, which can wait a little bit, I think. The good news, I think, from our perspective is, we are in contact, with both parties, with all the parties in the coalition. And I think in terms of the relationship with the United States and our shared goals and values, I don't see any major difference there, and by all the signs, the rotation when it happens will be well managed and smooth. At least that's what that's they're predicting, and we see no indications to the contrary.
Yeah, so you take it as sort of like the slow movement of politics anywhere in the world, in the sense it's delayed by personalities and accommodation.
Yeah, I think, our sense is that the coalition is working very well, and every, where we have been engaged on issues that we've seen, we see great coordination. We see signs that they talk to each other all the time, that they're coordinating on issues in anticipation of the rotation. I don't think we see a lot to be concerned about. Of course, the timing is up to the parties to figure out what makes the most sense.
And speaking of parties, what do you make of the rise of the Gold Party that seems to have come on stronger than most people thought in the last period of time, and not just them, but some other more nationalistic parties, smaller ones, albeit smaller ones. What do you make of that?
Well, I think all, a lot of Western democracies are contending with, the appearance of these kinds of parties. There's a lot of, I think it's, facilitated by social media and the sharing of, certain narratives. I don't think it's unusual right in this day and age. But I do think, that this country has, a clear direction in terms of its adherence to NATO, to the EU, to Western values. So I don't see this as a major threat to that, but I do think it's reflective of larger trends in the region.
One ambassador or former ambassador mentioned to me whether there was any inkling of a Russian hand in this. Do you think that's an overreach, or that's an idea that was put?
I can't speak to that. I don't know. But you recognize certain themes and narratives, and whether those are, coordinated or just happen to be, a confluence of interests, hard to gauge.
Yeah. You're talking there about the war, and the Foreign Minister of Romania, Bogdan Florescu, was on a BBC interview not too long ago, and he was asked to quantify Romania's activities in respect to the war in Ukraine. And he showed a certain kind of reticence, which didn't delight the BBC guy, but I understand his thinking. Could you give us a little bit of a closer feel on what the U.S. Ground forces are doing here in Romania, and tell us a little bit more about what we're up to?
So we have, since the beginning of the war, we've stationed more American troops here in Romania. We had, until recently, we had the headquarters of the 101st Airborne, and they have now left and been replaced by the 10th Mountain Division, in what we're calling kind of it's a rotational presence with different troops coming through, where we have a little over 3,000 American troops in country now. What are they doing? They are exercising with Romanian forces and allied forces, with other countries who have a troop presence here. The French have about 1,000 troops in country now, and there are other countries with smaller contingents. And what's the purpose? The purpose is, first and foremost, to strengthen deterrence in the eastern flank. The second is to operate together to train and improve interoperability. This is a great opportunity for troops to work together and learn, experience both the terrain and working with other forces within NATO. So they are working in some cases to improve facilities, to better house all these extra troops. To improve airfields and things like that. So that's, it's an exercise, I think, in deterrence overall, first and foremost, and in improving interoperability.
And are those numbers likely to go up? I know when they were announced by the Defense Department many months ago, I always thought, wow, that seems like a small number, but given the way the war went, it didn't seem like you needed a huge contingent of Western troops. But is that likely to go up? What do you think? Those
are decisions that'll be made elsewhere, in NATO or in Washington. So I can't really speak to that. I think what's more important to say is that they'll continue to be a presence, and at some level, which will depend on how things go. But keep in mind that no single country within the alliance is, the keeper of, all the forces. That forces are dispersed around Europe, and that's part of deterrence as well, that you have capabilities and capacities in different parts of the continent.
I mean, when you think about how forces in Germany have sort of shifted over here, and Romania became a center point even before in respect to the Middle East, except for Poland, you'd think that Romania is probably the closest ally of the United States in Central and Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I'd say Poland and Romania together are kind of the backbone of the alliance. I think Chairman Rogers, chair of the House Defense Committee, described it that way, and I think that's a pretty accurate description.
Yeah, that seems absolutely right. With far-off hopes that we'll see an end to the war, or that it will peter out somehow, do you think Romania is particularly well suited for the reconstruction of Ukraine? I was talking to people at the IMF who a year ago said it was worth about 750 billion euros, the value of that job. God knows, sadly enough, the number goes up all the time. What's your view about that? Because there's a lot of talk about that Romania is well suited because of its expertise.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, first and foremost, let's hope that the war can end as soon as possible. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen immediately, but all the efforts now are focused on that. We know from history that there will have to be a big effort in reconstruction, and obviously neighbors who are nearby and have capabilities are in a good position. Romania has been one of the proponents of the 3 Cs initiative to improve kind of infrastructure, transportation within Europe, and I think that will help. That should help benefit reconstruction of Ukraine as well. I think Romania has been such a strong supporter of Ukraine throughout this period in terms of receiving refugees and assisting those that choose to stay here, in terms of helping ensure that Ukrainian grain can get out and get to markets. So I think there has been a lot of experience in cooperation and in creating new people-to-people ties that I would imagine will come into play when the focus turns to reconstruction.
I noticed while you were talking, we had a couple of questions come in.
Okay.
So I'll just throw it over to Raluca. Do you have something on your screen that I saw on the bottom of mine?
Yes, I want to remind everybody who's watching on the streaming platforms that you can put your questions in the comments as well. We have a question from Petronel Keviak. It's a little bit of a long question. A few days ago, 80% of Romanians said that corruption is the main threat to the democracy. Last week, one of the CEO appointed by the actual energy minister has been arrested for corruption. I am a whistleblower. Congratulations, by the way, on that. In a fraudulent appointment of no professional board in Hidroelectrica, fraud recognized also by the Court of Appeal. One of the personal advisors of this arrested CEOs is appointed in the supervision board of Hidroelectrica. How is Her Excellency Ambassador, Her Excellency regard the implementation of the best corporate governance and SOEs, and in particular in Hidroelectrica? And how does corruption affect the democracy and increase nationalist parties' influence in Romanian politics? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have to say that you've kind of been going in and out, so I didn't catch all the elements of the question, and I don't see it on my chat, but let me just say in general, on the issue of corruption, I mentioned, maybe let me take a step back and talk about my priorities here as ambassador. So first and foremost, I put my priorities in terms of three baskets. The first being security, of course, given the war next door, and that has to do with strengthening our military and defense relationships and within the alliance and bilaterally, and improving deterrence. The second is trade, focusing on increasing trade and investment. And the third is on strengthening democracy, including rule of law, media freedom, and people-to-people ties. And that third item of strengthening democracy includes efforts to combat corruption, which goes back to the second priority of increasing trade and investment, because we all know that companies look to invest in countries where they know there is strong rule of law, where they can, count on transparency, where they can count on predictability in the application of laws and government policies. So part of the goal here for me will be to support programs and efforts to improve rule of law in Romania, and that we do through cooperation on different programs. We just sent a group of procurement experts from certain government ministries to the United States to see how procurement works in the United States, what efforts are made there to anticipate and prevent efforts of corruption in the procurement process. So a lot of programs like that. We also work closely, our law enforcement is present here in the country, working with partners in justice ministry and in other agencies in combating organized crime, in improving, participating in training and things like that. So we'll continue all those activities and look for opportunities to improve the strength, the resiliency, and the of institutions in Romania that work in the area of rule of law.
I noticed, Mr. Ambassador, that you also interested in energy and renewable energy, and you're backing, or at least the U.S. government seems to be backing this interesting initiative to bring small mobile units made in the United States and in collaboration, I think, with Nuclear Electrica. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is an exciting initiative which involves the introduction into Romania of a new approach to nuclear energy, and that's through the use of small modular reactors, which is taking an old technology but kind of packaging it in a new way to make it more scalable, to make it possible to have smaller and larger reactors depending on the needs, and also with the new improvements in the technology that make it safer, drawing on the lessons from Fukushima and Chernobyl, to make sure there's a ability for the reactor to shut down safely in the case of an emergency that doesn't rely on electricity that is fully passive. So this is a exciting new technology that Romania has shown an interest in, and which the U.S. is also working to implement. There is a similar project in Idaho right now. This is something where Romania, which has experience in nuclear energy generation in its Chernobyl plant, is well placed because of its expertise to adopt. So we're working with our Exim Bank and other partners in the U.S. government, together with Nuclear Electrica and other players in a U.S. company, NuScale, to support this project in Romania. In addition, we're also supporting the efforts to renovate the first reactor at Chernobyl and to complete 2 new reactors, reactors 3 and 4.
And is it also, I heard that there's a chance that this could become a hub for developing this technology in this region. Is that the case?
It could become, definitely. And again, I think because Romania has this expertise, has nuclear engineers and people who have run a nuclear power plant, Romania, being first on the bandwagon for this, can be in a position to host a training center, for example. Right now, we're seeing a lot of other countries that want to adopt this technology, South Korea, for example. So I think we're going to see, we're seeing a lot of excitement and interest in adopting this new, let me emphasize that the technology itself is not new. What's new is how the reactor is scaled. It can be, parts of it can be built offsite. It can be smaller. It can be, drawing on existing technology. It's kind of like if you have battery packs, you can have, more, or, you can have a few, or you can have a lot, depending on the need, on the electrical needs.
I've heard that. Obviously, we've been hearing all about it. We've read about it in the New York Times and elsewhere. In some of the press here, someone told me there's some fake news that's slowing the momentum, undermining its support. Have you heard anything about that?
There have been, there was, I think, some time ago, there was a bit of some misinformation being circulated on social media, and questions being raised about the technology. And but I think we have done a lot of work together with the Romanian government that's working on this to try to help explain how the technology works, to discuss how the safety system works. And I think, it's, nuclear energy kind of went out of style for a while. So people, particularly after some of the bad accidents that occurred. So I think it's natural that people have questions. And I think the best, response is to, be open and transparent and explain how it works. And I think, I think that's what we've been doing, and that seems to be paying off.
Yeah, it looks like a very successful initiative, and it has a lot of momentum and a natural support. The French, who were developing nuclear nuclear commercial facilities in the 60s were out of tune. Now they seem quite wise to have done so. One of the issues that always pops up is the ever lingering status of visa waiver. And Romania, as a good ally, you would think would be not on the short list of people from this part of the world that don't have, I guess it's Romania and Bulgaria. What do you say to such a good ally, and what is being done?
So we are, this is an area where I would love during my mandate to see, Romania join a visa waiver program. And we're working closely with the Romanian government on the two parts of the effort that are involved. The first has to do with setting up information sharing and, procedures that make visa waiver work in terms of, sharing information about problematic individuals or things like that. But the second part has to do with the what's called the refusal rate, the percentage of Romanians who are turned down for a visitor visa. It only applies to visitor visas. And the U.S. law as written has a very low threshold for that rate can be. It has to be 3% or under. So on that side, what we're doing is working with the Romanian government to carry out an education campaign to help people be more successful as when they do apply for visas, to explain the types of visas so that people apply for the right kind of visas. For example, that they don't try to go work in the United States on a tourist visa. I think the trends are all in the right direction. So I'm generally optimistic. It will take a little time because the measurement is based on year. It's from October to October. So, we will, particularly in the fall, have a big campaign to try to help ensure that, as many applications are as successful as possible and help Romania qualify to enter the program.
So you're going to sidestep the question of what deadline, when this is going to actually work.
Well, it has to, it depends on there's objective criteria that has to be met. So what our effort is to help Romania meet that criteria.
I see. Well, the polls, I think, were very successful because I think they limited the number of applications that would push it over. In other words, they got rid of any bad apples beforehand, so it never got counted. Wouldn't that be a good formula here?
Well, I think what we want to do are encourage people who qualify to apply, and I would encourage people to apply starting in October so they get counted in the next calendar or the next year's count. And particularly people that have had visas in the past, they can apply online. They don't have to go in for an interview to get their visas renewed. So that will add. And again, just we say through education, encouraging people to apply for the right kind of visa at the right time. The more good applications we have, that lowers the percentage of the bad applications,
You mentioned investments, and I think you said when you were somewhere in the country in Timișoara, you gave an interview and you're talking about our investments have created, I think, 100,000 new jobs, basically based on U.S. investment. Have you set an overall target, either in terms of the amount of investment or in terms of what we'd hope for is job creation, the consequence of that investment? Do you set any targets internally in your mandate? This is what I'd like to do, like you just said about visa waiver.
No, I haven't set up any targets at this stage. I mean, I think that's difficult to do because, of course, it depends on business and their business decisions and lots of factors that we can't control or even predict. I mean, who would have predicted COVID or the war? Our focus is on helping Romania improve the business climate and address any business issues that do come up that make to help companies feel that this is a good environment to invest. And we are seeing that investment. I was just at a couple of American companies last week, I think, I was at Procter and Gamble, and I was at Coca-Cola. You know, and both companies are investing, have, you know, long relationships in the country, and are investing more in new technology, in creating, expanding their production. They're serving wider markets in Europe, in Turkey, and further on. So a lot of companies that are here have, you know, are well established and continue to invest. And what we can do is encourage, you know, companies that might be considering Romania to come in and take a look. I was just up in Iași, where Amazon has opened a research center. And just in Iași, Amazon has employs 2,000 you know, people with good jobs, you know, high-tech jobs. They have 4,000 employees throughout Romania. So I do see, and the companies tell us, you know, that there is good talent here in Romania. One thing I would note is, you know, like everyone else, they mention sometimes the shortage of qualified personnel, because people can go anywhere in Europe and be hired. So hopefully these new opportunities will help bring some people back. And I did meet a few people in Iași who had returned to Iași because they thought the city was doing well and they wanted to work, you know, in their own country. But, you know, that's you know, that's a challenge. Romania is a net importer now of employees. You know, they are, you know, I'm sure many of you know that now there are people coming in from Nepal and Sri Lanka filling service jobs. You know, so there's a lot of competition for labor.
I see that there's a question that was coming.
There are questions coming in everywhere, so you're a very popular ambassador. I'd like to kind of like select two of these which sounded very relevant. The first one is from Todor Stan, who is the head of the Immigration Research Forum, and it's a follow-up to the visa waiver conversation. The question is, would you support an effort to have the Department of State share actionable information on the main causes of visa denial or generic profiles of applicants being denied to assist a concerted effort in targeting appropriate information campaigns? So that's the first question.
One at a time.
Okay.
Did you hear the question, Ambassador? Did you hear that question?
Yeah, and I can see it on my screen. I'm looking at it. So, I mean, what we are working, you know, closely with the Romanian government, and we are, you know, in discussions, both, as I said, on kind of some of the information sharing aspects, but also information sharing agreements. But also strategizing on how to improve information. So, you know, this is being done, and I'm hopeful. One of the best lessons that other countries have told us that have gone through this process, including Poland and Croatia, or a couple of the countries who've joined visa waiver most recently, is that in each case, they appointed a coordinator within their government to be the single person on visa waiver that had the capacity to coordinate all the activities within their governments to help address visa waiver. And I believe the Romanian government is just about to appoint a visa waiver coordinator in the Prime Minister's office. So if that happens, you know, we'll have a single point of contact we can work with on, you know, on these issues.
And what was the other question there, Luca?
The other question comes from Juana on YouTube. We have several questions, so if we have time, we will take all of them. If we don't, we apologize. But the question is, US and Romania have a lot of shared values. Romania is lagging in terms of education. How could the US Embassy and the US contribute to raising the education level in Romania?
Yeah, well, on that, I mean, we have very different education systems, so I don't know that we, you know, are in a position to assist on the education system itself. And I know that there's a process right now with a new education law that's being considered in Parliament that has been worked on for several years now with inputs from a lot of people. So hopefully that will be helpful. From our side, what we do is promote educational exchange and in particular at the level of higher education through the Fulbright Commission, which supports educational exchange in both directions, Romanians to the United States and Americans to Romania. And I think we found that this is, the best venue for kind of sharing expertise on, on a range of topics, but including education on how the systems work and what people can learn. So I think that's probably the best venue for education, or I would say sharing expertise that can be useful here. Also, I think just our speaker program, we often bring speakers over with expertise, when there's an interest, who can speak on different topics, including education. So those are some of the things we do. Of course, we have a lot of, we also have a high school exchange program, which, people get exposure to education in the United States. But I think, a lot of the work, I think one of the best opportunities Romania has right now is through its accession to the OECD, which we haven't discussed, but is another Romanian goal, because the OECD is, I think, one of the premier institutions on providing expertise on education. And they are the ones that carry out, testing, to monitor and evaluate the level of education in a country, and that helps the country decide, where to put their focus in terms of reform. So I think Romania is making a lot of progress right now on its OECD accession. So hopefully that will also be a source of assistance and expertise.
I want to pick up on what you were saying a moment ago about the brain drain, and also as it connects to U.S. technology companies. The four largest companies in the world are American companies, and they're technology companies, and they're all quite big in Romania. You're going around the country, and from what I've seen myself is if you talk to a bunch of high school kids or even college-age kids, there's a huge desire to leave the country. Now, a lot of these high-tech jobs can be had here in an expanding array of corporations. Do you have a particular view? I'm not saying officially as a representative of the government, but as personally, to urge people to stay behind to sort of help build their country.
Well, I think that will happen naturally as Romania continues to progress. I think it's natural for young people to want to go and try new things and travel. I did it when I was that age. You're always, you're curious about the rest of the world. I think of it in the following fashion. One of the places I lived growing up was in Spain. And when I was in Spain, Franco was still in power, and Spain was a very poor country. And at the time, a lot of Spaniards went to work in France and Germany. There was a big exodus. But, Spain, Franco died. Spain became a democratic country. It became part of the European Union. It started, receiving investment. And guess what started happening? Spaniards started returning with all the expertise they had gained working in other countries. And I have run into people who are in fact, considering or have decided to return because they see opportunities. I was just in Brussels talking to a young lady who had grown up in Spain, and she told me her parents plan to return to Cluj to open a business because they think things are improving there. So I think it will happen naturally. Should the government consider some kind of programs to attract people? I know some other countries have done that. Maybe Ireland has. So there, could be some more things that could be done. But I think what will bring people back is seeing a country that's working, where there are economic opportunities, where rule of law is strengthened, where there's predictability, accountability, and that will bring people home. And I know. Again, I go back to my point about, people are very mired in the problems of the moment and progress that they don't see. But if you take it in longer context, you see that there has been a lot of progress and a lot of improvement. And no, it's not perfect. It never is. But I think, I'm optimistic for Romania because I see a lot of opportunities. The access to EU funds and expertise is, having a huge impact. Lots of, big projects in store. So, I think, that's, I think over time, we're going to see things changing for the better.
What do you make of a kind of interesting phenomenon, the visa waiver going the other way, which is U.S. retirees coming from the United States and living in Romania? I've noticed in Timișoara, there are law firms that just cater to Americans who have their Social Security and decide to go back to Romania. And it sort of makes pretty good sense. It's a friendly country. Everybody speaks English. The country is beautiful. Your Social Security check goes a long way. What's your take on that? Have you seen much of that yet?
I have not run into that yet, but it doesn't surprise me. I think that's, a worldwide phenomenon. You see that happening in Portugal. You see it happening in Latin America, in Mexico. There were always lots of American retirees. I think one thing all of us, don't always keep in mind is that the world has become a much more mobile place, and people it used to be, maybe when I was young, if people emigrated and moved to the United States, they might never return to their home country or only go back once or twice. Now people, they might move to another country and go back every Christmas or every summer or, so I think it's natural that, people could consider retiring in other places once you're done working. Certainly, in the U.S., there was always, habit of going to Florida, but, why not Costa Rica? Why not Romania?
It seems to be a new trend from what I heard from lawyers in Timișoara. That's what they said, which surprised me. But then when they laid it out, it made a lot of good common sense. Yeah. Now, you're a long-term 15-year observer of Romania and Romanians. What quality of the Romanians do you admire in particular?
Oh, I think I really appreciate their hospitality, their warmness. They have, there's a gentleness. I think one of my favorite expressions in Romanian is "vorba dulce, multa duce." This ability to try to be, the soft approach, I think, Romania is, people generally feel safe here. They feel, that this is a hospitable place. And I think the other thing I appreciate and admire about the Romanians, I know people worry about the education system, but lots of very, very smart and intelligent Romanians. I don't know whose measure it is, but they, I've seen a claim that, they're among the strongest IT professionals in Europe. We see lots of Romanians succeeding in Silicon Valley. There was always a strong sciences, here, and there still is. So, I think there's a lot of talent. I go back to saying I'm really optimistic for Romania. I think it has a lot of talent and potential. There are some governing aspects to try to improve and get right. But with the EU support and all the opportunities that people have, I think there's a lot of positive things coming.
Professor Denis Dilettant, who's an expert on Romanian studies from London and was at Georgetown, actually, for a while. He said Romania's always found a pragmatic bridge to the United States. He said in World War I, at the end of World War II, in the so-called positive periods in the 70s, where under Carter and so forth, the countries got along well, maybe not fully aware what was really going on in Romania. And again, after 89, in a way, they always find a way to make the thing work out. It's a kind of pragmatism and so forth. What's your view on that? Is it fair assessment? There's a joke, they say Romanians can go in a sort of a rotating door, you know, go in behind you and end out in front of you.
I hadn't heard that, but that's cute. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I tend to have, you know, I think there is a temptation always in international affairs to characterize people in, you know, to attribute certain characteristics to a nationality. But I think people are much more shaped by circumstances and, you know, and I think a lot of nations and countries have capacities for both good and bad. And, you know, and it depends kind of on leadership and the times that we're in. But I mean, I think Romania's been fortunate in the last, you know, since the fall of communism to have chosen, you know, a path that provides a lot of opportunities and open door that can bring in new ideas. So, you know, I think, you know, the important decisions were taken when Romania decided that it was going to, you know, cast its lot with NATO, with the EU, with the West.
You strike me as someone who's gung-ho and pretty optimistic. Is that, I said shy and modest at the beginning, but now I say gung-ho and optimistic. Is that the way you sort of, how do you feel about the job? Because you have started, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, how do I feel about the job? It's a huge honor. Yeah, no, I feel it's a huge honor because I think it's a really great and positive relationship that we have, as I said, that's based on shared values. And that is, you know, something that can only get better, I think. And, you know, so I mean, I'm optimistic because I see progress, because I see commitment, because I see, you know, a deep belief in democratic values. You know, not every single individual, but I think overall, Romanians know where they want to go, and they're, you know, trying to, you know, paddle in that direction. So that makes me optimistic. We don't have, you know, deep, you know, divisions as, you know, we might with some other countries. So it's definitely a pleasure to serve here and to try to, you know, contribute. So yes, that makes me optimistic. That and the time that I spent here before, and yeah, and generally, I mean, I think in the world we have to, you know, work for what we want, and if we want is positive and good, then we have to put the focus on that, because there are plenty of people out there, you know, busy trying to tear things down. We talked about disinformation, malign influence, you know, hate speech, all those things. You know, I think the best way to combat that is to focus on the positive and make things work, find solutions, bring people together, and that is the way to go forward.
Well, I think that's a perfect summary, and it's a positive one. I know you actually have a household of expertise because your husband's an expert as well in Romania. Is he here with you on this during this time?
Yeah, and you know, he is, as you say, he's a retired diplomat. We were here together on my last tour. His ties to Romania go even deeper than mine, because his father served here at the U.S. Embassy in the early 60s. Yeah, his father was at the embassy between 1963 and 65, I believe. And so he actually attended the American School of Bucharest in its second year of operation.
Near the old embassy.
Yeah. So, you know, and it was for his parents, one of their favorite tours, and always a point of reference in his life growing up, which is probably why we ended up coming here in the, you know, when we did, because there was such a positive family memory about it. Despite the challenges of the time, you know, when they were here. So yeah, and he is, he's a bit of a writer, and he's working on a diplomatic history of U.S.-Romanian relations. So he provides me lots of input and perspective in his work.
Well, that sounds fantastic. It's a perfect environment. And although I suppose to some extent you can't get away from work because you go home and discover some work subject to talk to over the dining room table. Anyways, I want to thank you. That was a fantastic introduction for viewers and listeners. And I thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, and I appreciate the chance to reach out, and thanks for all the good work that Alianta is doing. I think people-to-people ties are what make the relationship work. So thank you, and thanks to everyone who is supporting stronger U.S.-Romanian relations.
Thank you again. Thank you for your time.
All right.
Bye-bye.